Chapter 1. The Shadows of Assur. In a back alley, on the edge of the artisan's quarter, lived a young man named Zabani-Assur, son of a widowed potter and a priestess who died too soon in a plague epidemic. His name, which meant, the one who escapes by the will of Assur, seemed prophetic. From an early age he had learned to sneak among the shadows and survive unseen, a shadow among others in the city of the god. His home was a one-room hut, with mud walls and a roof of dried reeds. The floor was beaten, and in the corner a small sesame oil wick always burned, the only source of light in the long evenings. His father, Nur-Elum, spent his days shaping vessels for temples and markets, while Zabani had learned to borrow from those who were too allot. Their table often included a stew of lentils or millet, served in a single clay pot for all to eat on good days. When they sold a well-painted pot, they also allowed themselves dried tiger fish, dates, or a steaming flatbread from the neighborhood's communal oven.One warm evening, as the moon rose palely over the ziggurat's towers. Zabani planned a new theft. He had heard rumors of a shipment of jewelry that was to be temporarily stored in the house of a palace official, Ennatum-bel, a corrupt scribe who took bribes on behalf of the king. The theft was carried out quickly. Zabani crept onto the roof of the house, silently cut a mat, and entered the room where the filigree gold necklaces and bracelets lay. But as he was leaving, a patrol spotted him. He was forced to flee through the empty stalls of the market, slipping through the courtyards and passages until, unexpectedly, he came close to the inner garden of the royal palace, where no commoner was allowed to tread. Hidden in the myrtle bushes, his heart pounding, he caught sight of Princess Mullissu for the first time, a teenage girl with ebony eyes, the daughter of King Iddin-Sîn and Queen Tashmetu, a woman renowned for her beauty and cruelty. The princess held a small harp in her hands, and around her stood a few silent maids. Zabani looked at her for a moment, and in that look a crazy thought was born, not just to steal from the powerful, but to penetrate their world, into the very heart of power. But heavy footsteps were approaching. Guards patrolled close. With bated breath, Zabani slipped back into the darkness, but not before a gold bracelet fell from her cloak, remaining hanging from a wild rose branch, right under the eyes of a maid. That bracelet would trigger, without him knowing, a discreet hunt. The palace had been touched by the shadow of a thief, and Zabani's world would change forever. Zabani was running. The darkness of the palace garden was no longer an ally, but a labyrinth. The guards' footsteps were approaching, their heavy stilts hitting the compacted earth like drums of destiny. The guards knew, whoever enters the royal space without permission deserves a whip or death. The thief fell silent. He pressed himself against a warm wall, smelling the scent of jasmine and expensive oils that floated in the air. Then, as if pulled by an unseen force, he slipped up a stone staircase, hidden in the shadow of a colonnade. At the end of the staircase, a heavy curtain, embroidered with sacred symbols, hid the entrance to Princess Mullissu's suite. The moment he lifted it gently, his fate was sealed. The princess sat on a lion-legged chair in an open corner of the room, the linen curtains fluttering in the evening breeze. Her hair was tied in long ponytails, braided with gold thread and lapis lazuli beads, and her robes were of shining white linen, cinched at the waist with a red sash embroidered with sacred symbols, stars, and birds of the goddess Ishtar. Thin veil fell over her shoulders, and her ankles were adorned with fine bronze rings. Behind her, a cedar-canopied litter, adorned with gold fringe and blue feathers, stood ready. When she traveled, it was carried by 4 Nubian slaves chosen for their strength and loyalty. Zabani remained motionless, mesmerized not only by the princess's beauty, but by the certainty with which she looked at him. Her eyes, almond-shaped and dark as the night before storms, they showed no fear, but curiosity. "Who are you?" she asked, in a low, almost playful voice. He swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on the back exit. A dream that went the wrong way," he whispered, with a half-smile. Mullissu chuckled. She was 20 years old and, although raised in gold and prohibitions, she longed for something more than the recitation of sacred texts and the bowing of eunuchs. The thief's beauty, with his tanned skin, sharp eyes and feline movements, had surprised her. He seemed more alive to her than all the men in the palace put together. "Hide him," she ordered shortly, and 2 nearby slaves, Nur-Elum and Zamu, looked at her for a moment, then bent down and pulled Zabani behind a heavy curtain, near the fragrant vessels. The guards entered with a noise. The blood offerings and punishment were red in their eyes. Princess Mullissu, we have been following an intruder. We believe he has slipped into the royal gardens. She straightened her back and smiled. With calm gestures, she raised a bronze cup and sipped slowly. No one enters my garden without permission. Maybe you dreamed it, soldiers, or maybe it's a spirit. There's only silence here. And I, with my ladies. The guards didn't have the courage to contradict her or to look further. Not after the princess had spoken. When they came out, the slaves sighed in relief. Zabani slowly rose from behind the curtain, looking at the princess. She was still smiling, but a dangerous light burned in her eyes now. Now that you have seen the palace, what will you do, dream? She asks. I will dream it again, he replied. Thus began a secret alliance, a dangerous game between a thief from the potter's quarter and a princess who wanted more than she was offered. Behind the clay walls and silk curtains, their story was just beginning. Chapter 2. Under the Seal of the Heart. Silence had fallen over the royal suite, but inside, the princess's heart was beating with a new, unknown agitation. Mullissu looked again at the young man who did not tremble, did not ask for forgiveness, did not bow. He just looked at her, as if she were not a king's daughter, but a woman. You have blind courage, or a mad soul, she said as she ran her fingers over the embroidery of her belt, avoiding his gaze for a moment. I only have eyes that see what is denied them, and they cannot turn back from their path, Zabani replied, kneeling before her, not out of submission, but out of fascination. She smiled. She was as beautiful as the goddess Ishtar on festival night, with lips as soft as pomegranates and eyes that lit embers under the skin. She approached him and, with determined gestures, placed a small clay object, sealed with gold and red wax, in his hands. It is a letter with my seal. If they catch you again, show them this. No one touches those I protect. Zabani held it in his hands as if it were a sacred treasure. His eyes sipped it, and all he wanted was to stay there with her. Tomorrow night, she continued, whispering close to his ear, come again in the royal garden, at the north gate. Nur-Elum will be waiting for you. But be careful, Zabani. You carry more than a seal now, you carry my secret. He touched his forehead to the back of her hand. For a moment, time stood still. Even the air seemed to be wary when Zabani emerged from the royal suite, sneaking up the same hidden staircase. In his hand, he clutched the letter with the royal seal, and at his waist the small bag, with the stolen jewels, but in his mind there was only her face. The run home was short, but charged with adrenaline. He slipped through the side streets, past the wall of the ziggurat and finally reached his hut. His father was sleeping, snoring among the unfinished clay pots. Zabani hid his bag under the mat and took out the letter under the tunic. The light of the lamp made her seal shine, a seven-rayed sun, the symbol of the royal house of Assur. All night, Zabani did not close an eye. He lay on the mat, looking at the reed ceiling, his heart burning. He did not think of jewelry, nor of dangers. He thought only of her eyes, of the smile that promised an end and a beginning, of her name, which he said in his mind like a forbidden prayer. Mullissu, Mullissu, Mullissu. The morning had descended on Assur with a golden light, breaking on the clay roofs and the domes of the temples. Zabani hid her bag of jewelry in her bosom and slipped out of the house, slipping through the narrow alleys to the edge of the bazaar. Under a vault of woven reeds, hung with ribbons of dyed wool, was the workshop of the most sought-after tailor in the city, Ennatum-bel, craftsman of noble robes and supplier to the priestly houses. Zabani discreetly tosses a gold ring onto the table covered with linen and silk threads, and old Ennatum-bel raises his eyebrows, acknowledging its value. I want a garment that will turn heads. Noble, but not ostentatious. Fit for a man who walks among the gods without trembling, Zabani said with a slight smile. The tailor laughed in his beard and gave an order to his apprentices. By sunset, Zabani had what he had asked for. The garment was of fine linen, brought from Egypt, dyed a deep blue like the sky before a storm. Over the tunic he wore a short cloak of wool dyed red with dates, fastened at the shoulder with a bronze brooch in the shape of a griffin. A belt of soft goatskin, embroidered with copper and obsidian threads, marked his waist, and his sandals were new, made of gazelle skin, tied with black laces. Zabani did not look like a prince. He looked like a god descended among men. As the sun sank into the Tigris, Zabani climbed to the gate of the north of the royal palace, surrounded by high walls of burnt brick, decorated with bas-reliefs depicting winged lions and sacred bulls. A soldier with a copper helmet and a long spear stopped him, but when Zabani took out the letter with the seal of the seven-rayed sun, The guard said nothing more. He bowed deeply, as if before a palace messenger. "Wait here, sir," the soldier murmured, and immediately sent a servant inside. A few moments later, Nur-Elum, the slave girl dressed in a simple white cotton dress, appeared. She motioned for Zabani to follow her without a word. The palace was a world apart. The corridors were lit by sesame oil lamps, and the walls painted with gods and guardian spirits seemed to be watching him. The ceiling was supported by cedar beams, and the floors were covered with woven mats, soft under his feet. Every now and then, a silent servant would pass by with an alabaster tray or vases of perfume. Nur-Elum led him through a hidden passage, past an inner courtyard with a fountain, then through a portico open to the garden. And there, in the shade of a blossoming almond tree, she was waiting for him. The Princess Mullissu, dressed in a flowing dress of pale green linen, embroidered at the edges with golden lotus flowers. Her hair was left loose, shiny black waves falling to her shoulders. Around her neck she wore a necklace of small pearls and a single bronze bracelet on her left arm. When she saw him, she smiled. "I thought you might not come," she said, playing with a flower between her fingers. "And let you wait among the gods and roses?" "Not even the wind allows that," Zabani replied, slowly approaching. The garden was a sanctuary. Date, pomegranate and almond trees rose among the cobblestone alleys, and birds sang under the starry sky. Stone fountains murmured clean water in round vases, and the scents of myrrh, mint and cinnamon floated in the air. Zabani stopped in front of her. "I am here. I am no longer a thief. Not in front of you." She reached out, lightly touching the embroidery of his cloak. "Clothes don't change you, nor do words. But maybe," she looked him in the eye, "love does." And under the soft lights of the royal garden, two young people from opposite worlds began to build a forbidden but irresistible path. Chapter 3. The Kiss That Changes Destinies. Night had descended like a velvet curtain over the royal gardens of the city of Assur, and the lights of the lanterns burned shyly between the trees, bathing the faces of the two young people in a warm, almost unreal light. Zabani and Mullissu sat on a stone bench under a canopy of wild vines. The leaves rustled in the gentle wind, and from somewhere to the south, the sound of a festive flute floated like a promise. Time seemed to have forgotten them. "Have you ever been beyond the palace walls?" Zabani asked, looking at her with a gentleness that the life of a thief had never given him. She shook her head slightly. "Never. I have never even been to the temples without a full retinue and a veil to hide my face. I do not know the markets. I have not smelled the baked bread on the side of the road. I have not danced under the open sky." Then she looked at him, and in her eyes there was a window to something deep and alive. "That is why I called you, not just because you are beautiful, not just because you are brave, but because you know the city that I only see from the window. I want you to show me. Secretly, if necessary. With your eyes." Zabani, he looked at her, surprised, moved by her cruel honesty. "Do you trust me? I am a nobody, a potter's son, a thief." She touched his hand, a simple gesture, but full of noble tenderness. "You are the first man who has looked at me as a woman, not as a princess. And yes, I trust you. If I dare to escape from this golden cage, it is because you are there." Zabani closed her eyes for a moment. "I will take you wherever you want. I will show you every corner of the city, from the steps of the temple of Assur to the grassy fields by the river. But you must know, it is dangerous. If you are discovered, the blame will fall on me too." She smiled. "I am the daughter of King Iddin-Sîn, but I am not a prisoner of fear. I want to live. I want to breathe the air of the crowd, to taste the pomegranates in the bazaar, to see how an Akkadian child laughs. And I want to be with you." A dense silence floated between them. Then, with unexpected determination, Mullissu leaned towards him. Her hand stopped on his cheek, and her lips, soft as lotus petals, pressed against his in a brief kiss, but charged with the electricity of a forbidden future. Zabani did not dare to move. It was as if the gods had frozen with him. When she broke away, the princess seemed stronger, like a silent storm that had just begun. "In 3 days," she whispered, "when my father and mother go to the sanctuary of Der for offerings, Nur-Elum will bring you here again. Then you will be my guide, Zabani, of my soul, and perhaps of my destiny." Then she turned and, without looking back, disappeared among the stone columns, on her way to the royal apartments. Nur-Elum appeared as if from the shadows. "It is time," she said simply. Zabani followed her in silence, his heart beating like a drummer during a war ritual. The corridors seemed more familiar now, but his steps carried the weight of a promise. The north gate. Nur-Elum stopped and looked him in the eye for the first time. Take care of her heart. More than your life. Zabani bowed her head, then stepped into the night of the city that was sleeping, but which, in 3 days, would become a scene for the most dangerous love. The garden was empty now, only a few late flowers still swayed the scent of a night full of mystery. Mullissu walked slowly along the stone paths, holding her palms tightly pressed to her chest, as if her heart wanted to run away from her. The lights of the lamps made her seem like a statue of living bronze, and her eyes searched for something that could not be seen, only felt. On the threshold of her room, Nur-Elum was waiting for her. You lied to me, mistress, he said gently. You said you only wanted a walk in the garden, but you were with him. Mullissu stopped. She did not seem angry, only overwhelmed. Yes, I was with him. And I'm not sorry. He entered the room and sat down on a low cushion, under a fine linen curtain. Nur-Elum closed the door and came closer. Tell me, who is he? Why did he stir your blood like this? Mullissu ran his fingers through his hair. I don't know where he comes from. I don't know what he stole and why he was running from the guards. I don't know who his parents are. But when I saw him, Nur-Elum, I felt that he saw me. Not Princess Mullissu. Not the daughter of King Iddin-Sîn. But me. That girl no one ever listened to. Nur-Elum looked at her with the eyes of a woman who knew what forbidden love meant. Do you love him? I don't know if it's love, but my soul burns when I think of him. I kissed him. With my lips. Not because I was asked, but because I wanted to. Do you know what that means, Nur-Elum? The slave sighed, sitting down in front of her. Yes, I know, but we must be careful. Love, when hidden, can become both light and sword. The silence between them was filled with the rustling of date leaves. Then Mullissu looked up. When the evening of my parents' departure comes, I will leave the palace. But I cannot go dressed as a king's daughter. I must be a simple, ordinary girl. Nur-Elum smiled, and in her eyes there was a mixture of fear and pride. I have kept some of my sister's clothes, the ones I used to wear to the palace when I was a free girl. They will be good for you: a tunic of thick cloth, dyed the color of dried pomegranate, a linen belt, and a simple woolen cloak, without embroidery. I will also put a thick scarf over your head, and no one will recognize you. I want to go barefoot, Mullissu said suddenly. Barefoot. Yes, to feel the earth. The stones. The cob know that I walk not as a mistress, but as a real woman as he walks. Nur-Elum looked at her with admiration. What began as a whim had turned into something much stronger, a woman who took her fate into her own hands. Then I will be with you. I will go to the northern gate. I will bring him. And when everyone is asleep, you will go out into the world for the first time, Mullissu. Not as a princess, but as a girl, in love. Mullissu closed her eyes. In 3 days, Nur-Elum 3 days until I breathe true life. The night passed slowly. I in her room. The princess did not sleep. Overwhelmed by trembling, she looked at the sky through the high window, wondering what the city would be like beyond the walls, what Zabani's arm would be like cutting through the crowd, what freedom would be like. In 3 days, she would find out. Chapter 4. The Burden of a Forbidden Love. On the morning of the 3rd day, Zabani was no longer the same young man who stole bracelets from the trays of unwary merchants. His eyes, once wild and distrustful, were now deep, lost in heavy thoughts. With a small silver bag hanging from his belt and the letter with the royal seal hidden under his tunic, he walked through the alleys of the old part of the city of Assur. The sun had not yet reached noon, and the market near the temple of Assur was bustling with life. The shouts of merchants, the smell of spices, fabrics hung in dozens of colors. But Zabani did not see them. He walked towards a shaded courtyard, where an old vine covered a small carpentry workshop. From inside, rhythmic blows and a familiar sigh could be heard. There he found Amarani, his childhood friend, with his hands full of flour and the heart as alive as in the days when they ran barefoot by the Tigris. Zabani! Cried Amarani with joy. Where have you been, brother? You disappeared as if the god Era had swallowed you. Zabani smiled palely, then pulled him aside, into a shady corner of the courtyard. I have to tell you something. And I don't know if you will believe me. I have seen a lot, Zabani. But tell me, your eyes are not those of a thief today. They are those of a man in love. The young man sighed and began. I met a girl. Not just any girl. A princess. Mullissu, daughter of King Iddin-Sîn and Queen Tashmetu. Hammurani remained motionless, looking as if the wind had taken his thoughts. You are crazy. Maybe, but it's true. I entered the palace by mistake, running away from the guards, and she hid me. She lied for me. She kissed me. And now, she wants to run away with me to the city, to show her the world she's never known. Hammurani rubbed his face with his hard-working hands. Zabani, do you know what this means? If you're caught, you won't catch the sunset. And they won't forgive her either. They'll lock her up forever, or worse. They'll force her to marry some alliance prince. I know everything. But she's the only one who's ever looked at me differently. Not as a thief, not as nothing. But as someone worthy of love. And I can't run away from that. Hammurani looked at him for a long time, then smiled bitterly. Mullissu, you say? Then you'll need a whole world of luck. Or the blessing of the god-Assur. And it still won't be enough. Zabani laughed shortly. Maybe. But at least I'll take her to the streets of the city once. Let her feel the wind from the harbor, taste the sweets from the fair, laugh with the people. After that everything collapses. Then so be it. But I can't back down. And where will you take her? To the harbor, then to the terrace near the Mason's Tower, where you can see the whole city at sunset. After that, maybe to my house, to show her that not all thieves sleep among rags and fear. Hammurani clapped his hands and laughed with a hint of admiration. You're crazy, but you're also alive. More alive than all those gold-clad nobility. Take care, brother. And if you need a hand, you know where to find me. Thank you, Hammurani. Don't forget, tonight. When the moon rises, she will be at the gate. Dressed like a simple girl, I will be there too. The sun was rising silently over the walls of Assur, and Zabani, looking at the sky, knew that soon he would walk alongside a princess not just on the streets of the city, but on the edge of the abyss between dream and punishment. Night had descended over the city like a cloak edged with stars, and the high walls of the palace were outlined in silent shadows, guarded by flickering fires in bronze bowls. Zabani waited at the north gate, dressed in his new clothes, a dark blue linen tunic with fine embroidery, a belt of dyed leather, and goatskin sandals. He wore a thin cloak over his shoulder, and in his trembling hands he clutched the royal seal. It was not fear, but something more dangerous. Hope. Time seemed like a frozen bird. Then she appeared. Nur-Elum, the faithful slave, modestly dressed, but with the look of a devoted guardian, addressed her briefly. Follow me. Not a word until we pass the silent courtyard. Behind her walked a young woman dressed in a simple dress of fine wool, in dusty grey. Her hair, once adorned with gold clips, was hidden under a thin cloth, and her eyes, those eyes, sparkled under the folds of the garment like two sources of divine light. It was Mullissu, the princess who descended from the palace into the world. Zabani, she whispered, and her voice was a tremor. I am here, my guide, my young man with clear eyes and a wild soul. Zabani could not take his eyes off her. He smiled, but he held out his hand. Follow me, wild rose, Zabani said with a playful air. It's time for you to meet the real Assur. They walked together through the walls, through silent streets and closed gates. Zabani first took her to the night market in the Mason's Quarter, where a few merchants still lit embers under trays of sweets. Mullissu tasted a sukalu for the first time, a sticky cake made with honey, figs and pistachios, and laughed like a child. It's divine. I was never allowed to eat anything bought from outside the royal kitchen. Now you are free, Zabani said. They continued to the banks of the Tigris River, where the clay lanterns reflected tremblingly in the water. Zabani led her along an alley known only to him, to a natural stone terrace, from where the city seemed a sea of weak lights. Look, he said. This is the heart of Assur. Not the palace. Not the temple. But the people, their smoke, laughter, pains and loves. Mullissu stood close to him, overwhelmed. You have offered me more in 1 hour than the entire royal court has ever given me in all my years. Zabani, if I can never return, I would like to stay here. He looked at her with an emotion that was difficult to control. I don't want to give you just an evening, I want to give you a life. But, are you ready to live without being a princess? She smiled broadly and touched his lips with hers again, this time with more courage. Maybe I don't know what it means to be a simple woman, but I know what it's like to be alive. And with you, I am. They returned late, on the same hidden route. Enlil waited, his eyes filled with tears at seeing her smile to the north gate. Mullissu whispered to her. In 2 days, I in the same place. Maybe, we will run away. Find a way. Zabani looked at her long. He was no longer just a thief now, he was a man who was going to steal a princess from her golden cage. Chapter 5. Under the Queen's Wing. King Iddin-Sîn and Queen Tashmetu had returned from their journey to the edge of the kingdom, where they had visited the temples and villages along the Zab River. The palace was bustling with hurried servants, open doors, and the sound of footsteps in the stone courtyards and front of the grand staircase, dressed in a purple and gold dress. Princess Mullissu greeted them with a smile on her lips and her heart hidden in her chest like a restless bird. The king hugged her to his chest with solemn gestures, and the queen looked at her for a long time, with the eyes of a mother who reads silences. You are beautiful, my child, more beautiful than the full moon over Assur, Tashmetu told her, but in her mind, anxiety had already begun to sprout. In the evening, silence had fallen over the palace, and in the room in the round tower, Mullissu sat next to Enlil, with her legs drawn up to her chest and her forehead pressed to the cold window sill. Her thoughts were far away, of Zabani, of his words, of the touch of his rough and warm hand. Then the door opened quietly. Queen Tashmetu stepped inside alone. Without a retinue, with only a gentle smile on her face and a torch in her hands. Enlil stood up and made a deep bow. Leave us alone, Enlil, the queen said calmly, and the slave listened to her without words, leaving silently. The queen approached her daughter and, with a warm gesture, ran her hand through her hair. My rose, you are different since we returned. You smile, but your eyes are dreaming. I know you. You are in love, aren't you? Mullissu stiffened. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. Mother, I didn't want to hide it from you. But how could I? Father wouldn't understand, and no one would understand. I understand, Tashmetu interrupted her gently. Love comes where it wants. He doesn't care about rank, palace, or law. Mullissu burst into tears, hiding her face in her trembling hands. He is a poor young man, a thief, mother. But he has eyes that tell the truth. He saw me as no one has ever seen me before. The queen hugged her, squeezing her gently. I was young too. And I know how the heart burns when it loves for the first time. I won't say anything to your father. But you will do one thing for me. Anything, Mullissu whispered, raising her tear-stained face. Whenever you meet him, Enlil will be with you. She will be my eyes. Not to stop you, but to protect you. Now, go to sleep, my child with dreams of a free woman. Mullissu clung to her lovingly, and the queen silently left, leaving behind a room where the desire and promise of a love were beginning to bloom, like a lily behind stone walls. Under the cover of night, when the palace torches burned dimly and only the footsteps of the night guard echoed rhythmically in the corridors, Mullissu, wrapped in a simple grey wool shawl, crept accompanied by Enlil, her faithful slave. Through a small service corridor, the two reached the side gate where Zabani was waiting for them, her eyes shining under the hood thrown over her head. Are you ready? He whispered with a hidden smile. More than ever, the princess replied, and Enlil heaved a long sigh, but followed her without comment. Under the dark arches of the city, the three slipped through dusty side streets to the slums, a place where the stone was cracked, the walls of the mud houses leaned against each other, and life pulsed in simplicity. They arrived in front of a low adobe house, dimly lit by an oil lamp. Zabani knocked discreetly on the door. Hamarani, he murmured, he's my friend. A good man. The door creaked and a young man with large, gentle eyes and a sunburned forehead appeared. When he saw Mullissu, in modest clothes, he started, but said nothing. She is Mullissu. And this is Enlil, said Zabani. I have brought them to see our truth. You are welcome, said Hamarani. Then he opened wider and led them into a modest room, with a worn carpet, a palm-wood table and the smell of baking dough. In the corner, an elderly woman, Hamarani's mother, was kneading cocoa with her gnarled hands. When she saw them, she smiled. Guests at the evening watch. You're lucky, the cakes are still warm. Mullissu, looking at the bare walls, the broken floor and the torn clothes of the children in the corner, felt her eyes moisten. For the first time in her life, the real world showed itself to her, not in gold and perfumes, but in sweat and love. She sat down and timidly tasted a small cake, filled with dates and sesame. Her eyes widened. "It's divine," she said. "Better than any sweet I've eaten in the palace." Nur-Elum, who was sitting back, exchanged a look with Hammurani. He handed her a cup of cold water. "Your name is beautiful. Like a spring evening," Hammurani said awkwardly. Nur-Elum blushed. For the first time, she felt a look that did not judge her, did not command her, but discovered her. "And yours is strong. From the great Hammurabi?" She joked shyly. "Maybe, but I'm just grinding grain. My father is sleeping now, he's tired. The day starts early for us." Zabani watched Melissa laugh, finger the old wood of the table, and talk to Hammurani's mother. She was no longer a princess, she was a free girl, beautiful in her simplicity. That night, there were no princes and thieves, no slaves and millers. There were just 4 silent hearts, bound by a moment of truth, in a house of clay, where love grew purer than ever. The next morning, Zabani carefully led Mullissu and Nur-Elum back to the north gate of the palace. The sun was just rising over the Tigris, and the air was still cool and damp. Before they parted, Zabani took the princess's hands in his and looked her long in the eyes. "I don't know where this road leads," he whispered, "but I will never turn back." Mullissu pulled him close and gave him a long, trembling kiss, like an unspoken promise. "Wait for me. Not only is my heart yours now, but so are my dreams," he told her, before disappearing back into the palace walls. The next day, in the alabaster halls of the palace, Mullissu knelt before Queen Tashmetu, her eyes burning with determination. "Mother, you must see for yourself. Those people, Hammurani, his mother, all of them, live in abject poverty. We eat figs and dates, but they don't even have clean water." The queen looked at her silently, then touched her cheek with her soft palm. "You are my daughter, and I have raised you to love the truth. If your heart desires to know the people, then we will go together. Official. Day. Without shame." At noon, the sun was shining high in the sky when the royal cortege, consisting of 2 litters, guards and a few officials, set off through the city gates towards the workers' district. The locals gathered on the side of the road, amazed at the sight of Queen Tashmetu and Princess Mullissu, in broad daylight, not in the mystical darkness of royal evenings. The princess litter was carved from cedar wood, adorned with gold fringes and blue ostrich feathers, symbols of purity and kingdom. When he approached Hammurani's house, the guard knocked on the clay door. Hammurani, awakened from sleep, his hands still stained with flour, opened it and remained petrified. On the threshold stood the queen, in all her royal splendor. "Most holy Inanna," he murmured and fell to his knees, his forehead touching the ground. "Rise, son of Mesopotamia," said the queen in a gentle but firm voice. "We have come to meet you. Not from above, but from close up." From the litter Mullissu descended. She no longer wore jewelry, nor silk. She was dressed simply, in a pale blue linen tunic tied with a ribbon at the waist. Her eyes shone when she saw Hammurani looking at her in amazement. "I promised you that I would return," she said. "And I returned with a listening mother." While the guard discreetly guarded the surroundings, the queen and the princess entered Hammurani's house. The boy's mother was in tears. She tried to clear the table, to wash the floor with cold water, but the queen stopped her. "Do not come to me with shame. We are all mothers. We all want to know that our sons do not go to bed hungry." In the silence that followed, Melissa whispered, "I want to start something, a royal granary. Clean water. Maybe even a scribe school for the children here. Maybe even another world," the queen said. "And if it comes from a girl who has learned to love a simple man, then that is a good start." Outside, the neighborhood children gathered around the litters in amazement, and Nur-Elum and Hammurani stood side by side, watching this moment that, though silent, was changing something. Maybe not the empire, but certainly hearts. Chapter 6. The Queen's Cry and the Crowd's Wonder. At dawn on the 3rd day after her visit to the slum, Queen Tashmetu gathered her advisors, architects, scribes, and the leaders of the royal guard. In a calm but sharp voice, she said, "I want the exact number of dwellings in the slum to the southeast. Every hut, every shack, every house of mud and stone must be registered. Bring me the tablets with the name, occupation, and number of members of each family." The royal guard immediately set in motion. Within 2 days, the discreet knocking on the clay doors and the inscriptions in soft wax on the clay tablets created a silent commotion. The people of the neighborhood did not know whether judgment or deliverance was approaching. On the third morning, under the clear sky, the entire square of the neighborhood was full of people. Workers, millers, blacksmiths, mothers with babies in their arms, barefoot children, all had gathered in silence, amazed by the procession that was descending towards them. To the head came Queen Tashmetu, her forehead crowned with a simple but shining tiara, flanked by the chiefs of the palace and accompanied by Princess Mullissu, dressed modestly again, with a belt embroidered by her own hand, but with her eyes burning with emotion. Behind them, Nur-Elum walked with a sure step, and next to her, Hammurani, more courageous than ever, stood straight as a pillar. The queen climbed onto a small wooden podium erected by soldiers and looked out into the crowd. Then, in a loud voice, she said, "People of labor, people forgotten for years, listen to the word of your queen." Dozens of heads rose. "I have seen how you lived, I have felt your suffering. And I have not returned to the palace to forget. Today, in the name of the kingdom and before the god Assur, I tell you, this place will be reborn." The crowd remained silent, no applause, no boos. Only wide eyes and unspoken doubts. The queen reached out and pulled Mullissu to her side. "From this day forward, your future queen, Princess Mullissu, will live among you every day. Not as a stranger, not as a noblewoman, but as a daughter of this people. She will oversee the building of a house of hope, right here. And from it will come food, water, and learning." The murmur was heard. Then a woman began to weep. Two other men removed their clay helmets and bowed silently. "If she has chosen to love her people, then she is worthy to lead you," the queen continued. "And to bring you a future." To that moment, Nur-Elum, her cheeks flushed, shook Hammurani's hand. Her smile was full of a sincere and new joy, like a flower that has just bloomed. "You are no longer just a shadowy dream," she whispered to him. "We are close. You and I, all of us, and the dusty, flower-scented streets." The promise of change began to take shape, not of stone or gold, but of a brave heart and a mother's understanding of her daughter. The royal palace of Assur was usually silent in the morning hours, when the sun barely shed its light on the brick courtyards and fig gardens. But that day, the echo of hurried footsteps and the rustle of official cloaks filled the corridors like an unspoken storm. King Iddin-Sîn sat on his carved wooden throne, his face furrowed with the wrinkles of power and the shadow of suspicion. He was a man of sharp judgment and eyes that forgot nothing. Around him, the council of 7, men chosen from the nations, the elders, advisors, and scribes, were whispering among themselves until one of them, the old Salima-Dad, stood up. "O King of Assur and guardian of the northern lands," he began, with a deep bow, "rumors have reached us of a series of unusual visits made by Queen Tashmetu and Princess Mullissu to one of the poorest districts of the city." "Rumors?" Iddin-Sîn said with a raised eyebrow. "And why palace does not live on rumors." Another advisor, Nur-Elum, dared to continue. "But these come not only from the mouths of servants, but also from the mouth of a captain of the guard. It is said that the princess was sitting there, among the beggars, without a full guard, in the midst of the working people." An uneasy murmur filled the throne room. The king rose to his feet. "My princess, my only daughter, is mingling with the crowd without my knowledge?" "Moreover, your majesty," added Salima-Dad in a low voice, "it is rumored that a connection has been formed between her and an unknown young man, a man with no noble name, no title, probably a pauper, or worse." "A thief," someone else added. A heavy sigh fell over the room. The king ran his hand over his beard. He was thinking deeply. Tashmetu was a wise woman, but if she had hidden all this, it meant that it was more than a game. "Call the queen to the secret hall, today, and prepare a messenger to call the princess after sunset." His sharp gaze did not admit of a reply. That same evening, in the small hall of the palace, lit only by sesame oil lamps, Queen Tashmetu entered with quiet steps. She bowed to her husband, but did not lower her gaze. "My wife," said the king, "what are you hiding behind your eyes?" "The truth," she answered simply. "Then tell me, is it true that our daughter mingling among the people of the slum?" "Yes." "And is it true that she approached a man there?" Tashmetu was silent for a moment, then, "She is, but she is not an ordinary person. Not in soul, nor in courage. She saved his life that night, in the garden. Have you forgotten the intruder who was not caught? It was him, and she saved him. Then he loved her with a sincere heart. She is the future queen. How can a thief love? because the heart knows no rank. And I, Tashmeta your queen, tell you, if you force her to forget him, you will lose her." The king sighed and rested his forehead in his hands. "Let Mullissu come too. But not as a judged daughter. I want to look her in the eye and see if her truth is stronger than the law." Chapter 7. Words under stone gazes. The council hall in the palace of Assur was a solemn chamber, its high walls covered with frescoes depicting ancient kings and glorious military campaigns. In the middle of the room, a circle of 7 sandalwood chairs, covered with cloth embroidered with royal symbols, formed the council of 7, elderly men dressed in long white linen robes, their beards carefully braided, each bearing the seal of his ancient family. On the throne at the end of the hall sat King Iddin-Sîn, his gaze cold as stone, and next to him, in silence, Queen Tashmeta, her face frozen between concern and support. The doors swung wide open. Princess Mullissu strode in with even steps and her forehead high, dressed in a simple blue cotton cloak, unadorned except for a leather belt tied tightly around her waist. Tea was not the entrance of a courtesan, but of a leader. "Princess Mullissu, heir to the throne of Assur," a scribe said, and then there was silence. The girl looked at each of the 7 and spoke without blinking. "I am here not as a daughter asking for forgiveness, but as a future queen asking for trust. What I have done, and what I will do, is for the people. Yes, I have gone among those I have known only from the stories of the priests. I have sat beside those who live on a handful of flour a day, in houses of broken clay. But there I found life, I found truth. And a man. A young man with pure eyes and a nobler soul than many at this table." An indignant murmur passed through the elders, but Mullissu did not budge. "I, Mullissu, not only your daughter, but the blood of this people, tell you that I will not be ashamed of my love, nor of my plan. This neighborhood will be reborn. And yes, I will move forward. With or without your will. And if necessary, I will place my crown at the feet of those who work with blood under the sun. Because they are Assur, not the walls of this city." One of the advisors, Salim-Adad, stands up angrily. "Fine words, child, but the throne is not held with dreams. It is held with noble blood, with alliances and with obedience. What do you want? It is dangerous. Princess who loves a thief, who breaks protocol and shakes traditions, can tear down what has been built in dozens of generations." "Then let it fall," Mullissu answered in a clear voice. "Because no wall is worth it if it is a wall between people." King Iddin-Sîn watched in silence, and in his eyes trembled the struggle of a father who saw his child becoming a force, and of a king who felt his tradition falter. For a few moments, the silence was almost heavy. Then, with a simple gesture of his hand, the king said, "Go forward, my daughter. But every step you take will have the weight of the throne. I will not stop you. But I will not be able to defend you forever." The counselors' gazes darkened. Behind the thick eyebrows and rich cloaks, thoughts sharp as blades were already spinning. After the princess left, in a side room, those in the council remained for a secret council. "If this girl ascends the throne with that poor boy on her arm, our nation will be ashamed," said one. "She must be stopped, without the king knowing. There must be a mistake, a fault, a reason to discredit her before it is too late. Or, an accident," another murmured with narrowed eyes. In the darkness behind the power, a plan was beginning to take shape. On the northern edge of the slum, where the smell of smoke mixed with the fragrance of garden flowers, a new building was erected, modest but powerful. People already called it the House of Hope, although it was not yet the promised palace, but a living warehouse, into which flowed the heart and sweat of an entire community. From dawn of each day, royal slaves, volunteer workers and even the women of the neighborhood brought clay, stone, reed and wood. Each piece was carefully stored, and in a small, simple wing, a room had been arranged for Princess Mullissu, with a clean mat, a clay table and a small window to the sky. Every day, Zabani worked alongside her, with dusty hands and hearts bound by the same dream. The two had never been apart. It is said that no one in all of Assur had never seen a princess carrying buckets of water or lifting a beam with workers. But love made her forget who she had been. She only knew who she was becoming. In the evening, they returned to their room in the House of Hope. There, by the light of an oil lamp, with her face resting on Zabani's chest, Mullissu dreamed with her eyes open. Their dream was taking shape, a world in which nobility was earned, not inherited. In the silence of that simple universe, Nur-Elum and Hammurani lived their love gently. He sometimes secretly took her to the mill, where they laughed in whispers in the smell of crushed wheat. They touched their hands more than their faces, but each touch was a promise. An old man in shabby clothes, his hair covered by a tattered scarf, sat on the edge of the bridge at the entrance to the neighborhood. No one knew him. His hands were dirty with dust and his gaze was harsh but silent. He didn't ask for anything, he didn't reach out, he just stood and watched. A little boy brought him water, a little girl handed him a piece of an old woman offered him a thicker coat. The people of the slum, poor and tired, did not ask him anything, they just welcomed him. That was what they had learned from the girl with the blue cloak and the young man with the pure heart. After the sun went down, the old man got up and looked at the sky. Then he made his way to the palace, and from under his ragged clothes, his trembling hand took out a heavy ring with the royal seal. He stopped in front of the guard, and the soldiers knelt on the spot. It was King Iddin-Sîn. Without a word, he entered the palace, but something new had lit up in his eyes. Not anger, not humiliation, but a question.